you want to learn how to write romance? Because if so, this is the interview for you. Today, I had the pleasure of chatting with contemporary young adult romance author Sarah Sutton. Sarah is the author of 6 young adult contemporary romances, including Christmas as We Know It, her most recent release. And today we had a fantastic conversation about all elements of the romance writing craft, including how to write swoon-worthy romances, how to write chemistry between characters, and also how to write books and publish them at a fast rate like she does. So if you're interested in learning how to write romance or learning how to write great romantic subplots if you don't write romance books, then stick around and watch this video until the end. I learned a lot from talking to Sarah, and I know that you will too. So without further ado, let's welcome Sarah Sutton to the channel. Sarah, I'm so happy to have you on the channel and to be chatting about romance today. Could you maybe start by telling us a little bit about yourself and your books?
Yeah, so I'm Sarah Sutton. I'm an indie author of now 6 young adult romance books. I published my 6th one on December 1st, and it's a Christmas romance. All of my books are standalones, so they can be read in any order, but the publication order I've heard is like the most interesting to read it in because all of the little Easter eggs littered through.
Right.
But yeah, and I've been publishing since January of 2020. So
Amazing. It's amazing you have 6 books out after only been publishing since January 2020. That's so impressive.
almost 2 years. It's crazy.
That is crazy. Correct me if I'm wrong, but I think 5 of your books are in the same like cinematic universe, right? In Love in Fenton County, and then
Yes.
Christmas as We Know It is separate. Okay.
Yes.
Awesome.
I love that you said I just love that. That sounds so nice.
I know, I love the term cinematic universe for talking about anything. What is your favorite thing about writing romance and what initially drew you to it?
Well, so it's not really like that hidden, but I've never been in love. So the idea of falling in love has always been so intriguing to me. Like I love romance movies, romance books. And for a while I was writing more like paranormal. So I had like other world building elements inside the story.
Mhm.
And I got to a point where my world building was so weak. And I'm like, maybe I should just try just writing just the romance. And as soon as I did, I fell in love. And it's nice to, with each book, the couples are falling in love, and it kind of feels like I'm falling in love with them.
Mhm.
So it's really sweet.
No, it sounds like a very heartwarming writing experience. I'm used to like books full of death and books full of murder. The last thing I want to do is imagine myself in the situations I write about. Did you always know that you wanted to be a writer?
Yeah, actually, weirdly enough, I feel like for me it has always been that. Like I started writing, I say it's first grade, but then that always sounds really young. But I feel like I remember that class, I started like writing little mini stories. And like even from then on, I was always writing stories and having my classmates read them. So I feel like it's just been a constant thing in my life. And once I figured out that you could actually do it like as a career, it was the only thing I focused on.
Yeah, same. I mean, and also indie publishing is so empowering. Like when you're able to
Yeah.
control the publishing speed, all like elements that go into creating the book, it's pretty amazing. It's like getting to do all of the different aspects and not relying on anybody else to kind of do them for you. You really have complete power over the whole process, which is awesome.
Yeah.
Yeah. So what did your writing education look like?
Honestly, it was really all just kind of self-taught. I did take, I think it was 2 college courses in high school. We had like a dual enrollment program,
Mhm.
and I was able to take 2 creative writing classes. But really, it was just all me doing it and having my English teachers kind of like read through it sometimes and give me tips and things. But I grew up on, it's not Wattpad, but it's very similar to Wattpad. It's called Quotev.
Okay.
And I was publishing One Direction fan fiction on there.
Wait, me too. I wrote One Direction fan fiction too.
Yes!
Well, like self-insert, like your name, like yeah.
I love it. Oh my gosh, that's fantastic. I did not know that about you, but oh my gosh, I love it. I started doing it on there, and those readers are kind of like brutal. And so I feel like it really taught me brutal in a good way. Like they enjoyed the stories, but they also helped me to like learn how to write better subplots, how to write like stronger dialogue, you know what I mean? Or which words was I spelling incorrectly? Because for the longest time I was spelling definitely defiantly. And so I know from a very aggressive commenter that is not spelled that
Oh
way.
man.
But I feel like that helped me grow a lot too, just having other people read it, even from like an early on time in my writing journey.
Mhm.
I think I started writing on Quotev back before I knew you could actually publish and like, like self-publish, because I didn't know anything about self-publishing. So that alone taught me a whole lot.
I mean, it's kind of amazing. It's like almost a critique group of people kind of in the comment section.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh my gosh. It was funny how like critiquing it was, but I feel like Quotev was a lot of other writers too who were readers. So it just really helped that way as well.
Yeah. Well, I mean, it probably takes a bit of a thick skin. Like, I feel like if I was reading comments like that, I would feel very, like, as a middle schooler, I feel very
Yeah.
self-conscious. Like, it's super mature that you're able to read those comments and take that constructive criticism and like improve upon it, or
Yeah.
read it in mind or whatever. No, that's really cool. What would you say is like the most valuable resource to you when you were learning how to write? Was it writing on Quotev, or was there another resource that was more valuable?
I think like what you said, having like kind of having a critique, you said. I had one friend who growing up, we were super close and she wanted to be a writer as well.
Oh, cool.
And I think that also had a huge impact because every time I would finish a chapter, I would send it to her. And every time she would finish a chapter, she would send it to me. So we were both growing and we could both share like our experiences and like what we learned and grow together,
Mhm.
which I think is more helpful than it seems, especially when you're kind of just starting out and you don't really know what you're doing. Having somebody else they could be starting out, they could be further along, but having somebody else to just bounce ideas off of with and kind of get a bit more confident in like your storytelling helped me grow so much quicker than I think I would have without her.
Definitely critique groups help so much, or critique partners, or people who will read and give feedback. Because I mean, even like when you do a lot of work trying to get better at writing it like by yourself, it's hard. Like, I always feel like even when I write my books, I will really, really like them in the first draft. And then in the second draft, I'll really, really hate them. And as soon as I get feedback from like beta readers or an editor, I'm like, okay, there's like a plan and a way that I can improve it. Cause it's really hard to kind of self-analyze a lot when you're also trying to be creative. So no, I
For
definitely
sure.
agree with you.
And I feel like too, you never know how good or how bad something is until you have somebody else look it over. I think I feel like with one of my earlier novels with her, I had thought it was super good and then she had had critiques and stuff like that. I'm like, oh, those make valid sense because sometimes you don't see those plot holes or things like that until somebody else points them out, which I mean makes total sense.
So are you more of a plotter or a pantser when you write?
So I started off more of a pantser for sure.
Mhm.
I actually didn't start plotting until it was one of my recent books. Maybe Can't Catch My Breath, which is book number 4.
Mhm.
I didn't start plotting until like recently after I started self-publishing because when I started writing, I obviously didn't have like a publishing schedule in mind.
Mhm.
And so I could like just learn the story as I go and it didn't really need to be structured.
Mhm.
But as I've kind of gotten used or gotten to know my like the way I write more,
Mhm.
I find and now that I have like deadlines for like, oh, I want to publish this book by August 2022. I found that there's something super comforting about an outline.
Mhm.
And even though I do an outline now, it's nothing crazy. It's just like the save the cat plot beats. So like very basic, very simple. But there is something so comforting with having something to guide me as I go.
Yeah.
And I will be honest, so I plotted this book that I'm writing right now, and I had to stop because I forgot I realized I wanted to add some subplots in. And so I went and re-outlined going into draft 2 kind of. And that outline, okay, yeah, I gotta figure out how I want to organize my thoughts. I seem to outline so much more when I go into the next draft. And I
Mhm.
think I'm more of an outliner that way. I'm probably more of a planter when it comes to like half discovery writing the first draft, but
Right.
going into like the next drafts, I definitely have a solid outline.
Do you have a way that you outline? Do you, so you said that you save the cat. Do you just like write it in kind of a linear, like this is one beat and this is the next beat in like a Word document, or do you color code or do anything fancy for your outlines?
I use so up until recently, I've actually been doing it in a notebook, writing down each plot beat and writing down that way. But Angela Ann had introduced me to Notion,
Oh,
which
I love Notion.
oh my god. And for a book that has this series is going to have 7 books.
Mhm.
So it's gonna be so nice to have it on like that Notion kind of like web page.
Mhm.
And I'm able to like insert like a calendar onto the page. And I'm able to plot out like which day stuff happens, which is a new way that I'm outlining too. Like
Oh,
um
yeah.
so I can keep everything straight, you know?
Yeah.
And that has just been so nice. So recently I switched to Notion. I probably do both for now because I still love writing in my notebook and stuff, but Notion has been fantastic.
Could you talk a little bit about what Notion is for viewers who might not know what that is?
So I don't totally know a ton, but it's like, well, actually, I don't even know a ton more about what it is. All I know is that it's like, um,
I honestly don't know how to describe it
I don't
either.
know.
It's like,
I'm
like
like,
an organizational like interface, right? So that you
yeah,
can like create kind of the mind maps and like you can have schedules and things and like create personal websites with a bunch of right like kind of.
I think so. That sounds
Maybe I
right.
won't put this in the video.
You can just like tabs through each page, like, you know.
Yeah, I'll say if you want to learn more about what Notion is, I put a link to Notion in the description of this video.
Woo!
So what does your editing process look like?
Oh man. Okay. So it's kind of chaotic, to be honest.
I also know it's
And
probably different for every book, like just yeah.
yeah, for sure. And I think there are some constants, like, so when I like finish the first draft, I will let it sit for a week because I mean, obviously I would have liked to do longer, but I'm just itching to dive back in at that point.
Mhm.
And from there, I do sometimes people say to like read it through like itself first, but I don't have the patience to like keep looking at errors and just ghost past them. So what I do is typically by the end of draft 1, I do have a list of things I still want to change. So I'll make that master list of major edits and
Mhm.
then read through it the first time, making those major edits, and then going through it again, making the smaller kind of like tying threads together edits.
Mhm.
Um, and so I probably read the manuscript probably more than I would like because when I get to the publication phase, I'm done. I'm ready to not look at that book for a while.
Mhm.
But I do think it's helpful in the beginning to have read it so many times and familiarize myself so much in the beginning for
Definitely.
sure.
Yeah, no, I'm finding that now I'm like working on the audiobook for my book and I'm like listening to it back and I was like, I feel like I have all of this memorized. I'm like, I'm sick of hearing all of these story beats. Like, I
Yes.
feel like I know them so well already. I'm just like tired of hearing about them again. But
Literally.
yeah.
The audiobook is like my worst thing. I hate it so much because when I did Christmas as We Know It, I had listened to it out loud through like the word feature, how you can read things out loud or have things
Oh
read
yeah,
to you
yeah,
out
yeah.
loud. And I did it that way. And I did the audiobook the next week. And I'm like, I have to listen to this again. Like, really?
I mean, like it's always so exciting hearing another like the narrator's take on the different voices and stuff. Like that part's exciting. But I'm just like, oh, they're having the same conversation I've like listened to 10 million times. Like I'm so sick of hearing about it. We get it already. Like
Yes. And then you're like, man, is this boring to anybody else? Because you've listened to it and you've read it so many times.
yes. Oh my God. Totally. So pivoting a little bit, I mean, this is still like about craft stuff, but admittedly, as I mentioned before, I don't know a ton about romance, but I have heard from other romance authors that romance as a genre has like some plot beats that are, or like a general structure that is pretty expected from like romance readers a lot of the time. Like a lot of subgenres expect like happily ever afters. There's certain beats along the way that people expect when they're reading romance.
Yeah.
So what kind of structure does a typical romance book of yours have? Are they like similar? Are they different? Which plot beats do you think are essential to a romance book and which ones aren't? What's your take on that?
I feel like one thing that readers kind of always expect, at least from romances and at least from the books that I've seen, are towards the middle to the end, more so like in that little chunk. There is something that forces the love interest and the main character apart. I haven't really seen a book where that does not happen, because even if they are having, it's kind of like the all is lost beat in the Save the Cat, if you're familiar with that. So I feel like you have to have some separation, because for the majority of the book, you're seeing these two come together, either like enemies to lovers, friends to lovers. Something is leading to them getting to their happy ending. And the part where they have to be like forced apart and find their way back to each other, I think is a really important thing, because it ups the stakes and makes it like really climactic for the end, which makes sense. And it's just kind of a turn on like the other kind of plot beats, what there normally are for things that aren't romance. But as for romance, I think that is one that is pretty much a heavily expected thing. And for me, happily ever afters, I feel like romances almost should have them, because otherwise I feel like they're kind of more like tragic and sad.
Yeah, absolutely.
But I mean, that's my personal take. I
agree. I would feel so cheated if I read a romance and they like broke up sadly at the end.
No, and like if there's a duology, that's fine. You know, we're good. I can stick it out. But if they're like not, I could not.
Do you have a favorite like subgenre of romance, like the enemies to lovers, friends to lovers?
I love forbidden romance. So whenever I think of that, I think of Cassandra Clare's The Dark Artifices trilogy.
Which one is that? I always mix them up. Is that the one with like Emma and Julian?
Yes.
Okay.
So they can't fall in love because they're parabatai. I have no idea how to say that.
I have no idea how to say that. I used to have all these like temporary shadow hunter like rune tattoos that I would wear in middle school. I have this like picture of me as like a 13-year-old going to the City of Bones movie premiere, like decked out in like shadow hunter temporary tattoos.
I love that for you. Oh my god.
So great and also so tragic.
I used to have, for the City of that premiere, I had the ring that Jace wore. I had.
Oh yeah. Wait, was it like on a necklace? Because I think I had that too.
Oh my god, I love it.
It's so funny. I love The Dark Artifices though. I haven't really read, like I think I read the first 2 books. I didn't finish it because I think I was in college when they were coming out and just didn't have time. But I loved those 2 characters. I was so rooting for their relationship.
Same. And that's like the kind of, I think that's my ultimate favorite, is that like the 2 love interests, they can't be together and they want to be and they're fighting to be. That's so good.
Do you have any tips for creating chemistry between characters?
Ooh, that's a good one. Something I always think of and always recommend to anybody who ever asks is to think of like the senses, like sight, sound, taste, touch. Am I missing one? Sight,
sound, smell,
sight,
and hearing, right? Oh no, yeah. Sound is hearing. No.
I mean, well, yeah. So sight, smell, taste, touch, hearing.
Yes.
Right. Okay, cool. When you know how like there's that phrase like the 6th sense.
Yeah.
And so I used to think that there were actually 6 senses. There's not. There's only 5, right?
Yes.
Okay, cool. So anyway, I recommend. Oh my gosh, I recommend.
Counting is not my strong suit.
No, honest. Literally mine either. I recommend that anybody who's like trying to build chemistry implement those senses, because I feel like what you want to do is you want to create chemistry between the characters, yes, but you also want to create an emotional reaction within the reader to root for them. And that could be an easier way to tackle that idea, because I used to struggle with the whole chemistry element, and sometimes I feel like I do struggle, especially like in early drafts. But I feel like chemistry does come from seeing a character react to somebody else, and
Yeah.
really detailing out those emotions, like if she's got butterflies in her stomach, if her mouth is dry, if her pulse is racing, you know, detailing them out like that, the reader is able to feel those themselves. And I feel like that also has the reader falling in love with the love interest. Because you can have chemistry if they have like everything is super similar, if everything is super opposite attract, if they hate each other, if they love each other, if they're best friends. But I feel like it all comes down to like how the senses are, and every character is going to have like different reactions. Like if they like physical touch, having somebody touch their hand will be a trigger, not trigger, that's a bad word, would be attractive to them, or I don't know,
Right.
intimate to them. Or
Yeah.
if they like are a words person, if the love interest says something sweet, then they'll have a reaction.
Uh-huh.
And so I think going with the five senses is really nice.
Do you come up with the love languages of your characters as you're writing?
Honestly, no. And it's something I have to kind of think about when I am editing, because I tend to give my characters my love languages because I just know them so well. And
Mhm.
I personally, so I'm physical touch and quality time.
Mhm.
So if somebody were to brush my hand, your girl would have butterflies. Well, like not in like a casual way, in like a romantic way, what I'm saying.
Yeah.
I would have, so I feel like I tend to make them a bit more like myself in the love language realm. So that is something that I always have to think about and go back and make sure it's different for each book, because I don't want them to be too similar.
That makes sense. I mean, it's also good to draw from personal experience, though, I'm sure. Like
Yeah.
yeah, I don't know. I feel like I need to focus more on building sensory, because I feel like I'm better at it when I'm trying to describe something like fear and like something that's scary or like nightmares and stuff, like, but with romance, I don't know, like I've had characters before where I was like, I want you to hook up in this book, but I don't really feel like you're gonna hook up unless I force you to in this scene, like it doesn't feel like they have
Right.
a lot of chemistry. Have you ever experienced like writing books where the two characters you wanted to have get together don't really feel like they should be getting together?
Yeah. So with my recent release, Christmas as We Know It, I literally wrote the first draft and the second draft, like full complete drafts. It was a pretty short draft, to be honest, maybe like 40,000 words.
Mhm.
And I had finished it and I'm like, okay, great. She is going to end up with this guy. In the first draft, there was zero chemistry. In the second draft, I bulked it up. I made the love interest more interesting. And I sent it to my beta readers, and they're all like, Sarah, she chose the wrong guy. Like, they have no chemistry. She has more chemistry with her best friend. And I'm like, oh, shoot. And that kind of chemistry came from like the witty banter that her and her best
Right.
friend have. So I feel like that makes sense. But it definitely has happened where I've written it and it just is not meant to be.
Well, it's good that you have beta readers that will give you that kind of feedback. Beta readers are super, super helpful.
And I'm glad. I was thinking about pushing off my beta reading like timeline too. So I sent it to them, I think like September 1st. And I was thinking about pushing it off until September 15th. And I'm glad that I didn't, because because my deadline was November 20th. And if I had to completely rewrite from September 1st to November 20th, whoo, you know what I mean? Crazy.
No, it's still a tight schedule to have gotten feedback back from beta readers and have to do that entire rewrite and still meet the November 20th deadline. Like,
But it worked out so well. And as soon as they pointed out like that aspect, I feel like the story completely changed into what it was supposed to be. And I've actually had a reviewer comment like, oh, I remember her saying that she rewrote this in December, and not in December, in September, and you can't even tell. And I'm like, phew. Like, great. I couldn't tell because I love the end result. But I was so nervous that since I had said it was rewritten, somebody would be like, oh yeah, I can totally tell. So I was like, okay, so it's not like obvious. Like, it still feels like a good story. Good.
so in your opinion, what makes a romance swoon-worthy?
Ooh, I feel like having well crafted characters is probably the biggest thing. World building, if they're set in like a fun beach town or on a cozy mountainside, I feel like that's fun, but it's not like none of the world building or scenes are necessary to have a full like Swoon-Worthy experience for me. I think characters are the biggest, making sure that they are well written and not like cliched, which can be tough because romance is such a well populated genre. But and making sure that their whole like evolution is believable and making sure that they do have an evolution.
Mhm.
Because the whole point to a Swoon-Worthy romance is the romance part, but I feel like to make it more realistic, having the characters have multiple things going on, like maybe with family, with friends,
Yeah.
and a love interest, I feel like it makes it more realistic. And that to me also makes it more Swoon-Worthy because it is realistic.
Right.
It's like I keep saying the word realistic, but it's a pretty natural sounding love story. And those are the ones that always stick with me.
When you're writing characters, I know that there are a lot of authors that, I mean, I don't know if there are a lot of authors that say this, or I've just heard this piece of writing advice before, that they'll say like it's better to keep characters like a little bit more, not like cardboard cutouts, but like a little bit more broadly like painted with broader brushes in order for readers to be able to relate to them more. Do you agree with that, or do you think like creating more specific characters makes it easier for readers to relate to them?
I don't know. I think I actually probably started off with a broader brush, like you had said, because I wanted them to be kind of universally able to be relate to. But I
Mhm.
think there's something so interesting about kind of more niche things. Like I read the blurb of a book. This girl, she was in ballet, and I know nothing about ballet. Like ballet to me, I would never want to do it. But and so her life experiences are things that I have no idea about. But I feel like it's so like niche down that it's so interesting to me to like see a ballet dancer fall in love. That sounds really cool.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So I think my experiences have changed. Before I probably would have said I would prefer to be more broader brush. I love that phrase. Broader brushed, But I do think now that I am more confident in how I build my characters, I think I want to start transitioning into characters who are from like who have pretty specific kind of like elements in their life. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, definitely. I always feel like I'm able to relate. Like if it's somebody, even if they're, I mean, as you said, like even if it's a completely different interest than mine, like if they are really into that thing and they have a very unique personality, like for whatever reason, I'm just able to connect to them more, even if I can't necessarily relate to their life experience. I unfortunately, like I went through a musical theater phase in high school and I decided I needed to learn ballet, but I'd never done it before. And I was like 16 in a beginner ballet class with a bunch of 7-year-olds. It was like one of the most embarrassing experiences of my entire
Oh my
life.
gosh, I would die.
Yeah, I went to 2 classes and I was like, I cannot do this, like as much as
Oh
I
my
want to
gosh.
learn. Yeah, nightmare
Good
inducing.
for you for doing 2 classes. I probably would have walked out.
Well, I mean, it's so tragic when like they would make us line up and we'd have to like go across the room one by one, and it was all these 7-year-olds doing it well, and like, oh, I can't even think about it. All right, we're gonna move on. Okay, so so you write and publish your books super quickly on such an impressive publishing schedule. How do you write and publish your books so fast? Like, do you have strategies or tips that you suggest for like streamlining your process? Tell us the secrets.
I feel like for me, I'm in a very unique situation right now. With I only have a part-time job. And I do freelance on the side, but I feel like and I'm not married, I don't have kids.
Mhm.
And so the two huge things that would take up time and a full-time job, the three huge things that would take up time, I don't have right now.
Mhm.
And so I think I'm taking good advantage of that.
Mhm.
But as for streamlining my process, I try to have like a set schedule of when I write
Mhm.
and make sure that I write then. I'm a girl who loves to be a procrastinator, so it can be tricky, but I think not letting myself stress about like the little things like in this previous draft that I was doing, didn't want to stop. I wanted to keep going until I hit a certain word count
Mhm.
and finish the manuscript before going back and editing because I feel like a common piece of advice in writing is that don't go back and edit, keep writing until you finish your draft.
Mhm.
Um, for me, that's not helpful. And I think I would probably waste so much more time if I did it that way. I think the why I write so fast is because if there's something wrong, immediately I stop and I go back
Mhm.
and I listen to my gut feeling. You know, if I'm like really close to the end and like I can't figure out like the last like final act, like third act, then I probably will see if I can like figure it out. But if I'm like in the middle and I don't love the beginning, I think going back immediately and re-outlining and refiguring out what's going on saves so much time. Um and I think that's something big that I've discovered since like If the Room Fits maybe.
Mhm.
And that's kind of why I feel like I can publish and write so quickly is because I don't waste any time finishing a draft that I'm not happy with.
No, that's smart. I need to get better at doing that, I think.
It's really tough because like even when I was at 48K and like I really 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 want to hit 50K. Like I just really want to hit 50K. And like I didn't want to go back because it was nano season. And
Mhm.
so the idea of forfeiting all of those words and it was nano season kind of like broke my heart. And then when I got into December, I'm like, well, this is kind of silly. If I don't like, you know what I mean? I was so obsessed with word counts and I think that can be not such a great thing sometimes. So,
Totally, yeah.
yeah.
Yeah, I had to do that with my book too. I like wrote it all the way up to the climax, and it was like the scene right before they were like about to chase the red herring that they thought was the actual murder person. And like they
Yeah.
found out that it wasn't, and they were like stationed there ready to do it. And I was like, you know what? Something about this isn't working for me, and I had to cut it off there, and I went back and I redid it. And then when I wrote the second draft, I actually went and wrote the climax because I knew that they were like, I had ideas for other subplots to add to the book or things that weren't working quite right. And if I wrote the
Yes.
climax with all those things and trying to tie them together, the climax wouldn't make any sense and I would have to redo it all anyway. So it's
Mhm.
definitely helpful to be able to do that and to find a balance that works
Yeah.
for you, because I think everybody is a little bit different with like what slows them down and what speeds them up. So being able to experiment
For
with
sure.
that.
Yeah.
I would be remiss if I didn't ask if you had any tips for writing cute kissing scenes that aren't awkward and cringy.
Well, my friend, honestly, I feel like the weirdest person to be talking like to talk about this because I have not kissed anybody, in fact. But I have written 6 books, and each book has at least one kiss in it.
Mm,
Um, and I think it also could kind of go back to the senses.
mhm,
But I feel like more so I write more of the kind of sweet realm of young adult contemporary. So nothing goes beyond a kiss. There's no like intimate body parts detailed.
mhm,
So I think tying in to make it not cringy, I think you have to kind of mix in internal dialogue as well as the kissing aspects. I think internal dialogue is a huge factor because otherwise, you're just and I think the language as well is tricky because there are certain words that I hate using,
like moist.
moist, like tongues. I hate
Oh
talking
yeah.
about tongues. Oh my gosh. Uh, and but there's something else. But so there's some languages that I avoid using because I personally just it ruins the romance factor for me. But I think the senses as well as internal dialogue for me has helped kind of craft a non-cringy kiss. Um,
Mhm.
and kind of being a little bit more realistic with it too could make it fun. Like if if they're awkward, they bump knees, then it's kind of funny or something, something. But tongues and kissing for some reason that just like ooh, that gives me
I
like
know,
the
or
chill.
like you're reading it and you're really into it, and then all of a sudden they'll have a word like that, and you're just like, oh, it just takes you right out of it so
Literally.
quickly.
Or like I was reading a book and it was like he mashed his tongue into her mouth. I'm like, ew, ew. I mean, I get that it happens, but why you gotta phrase it like that?
Yeah, like mash is like not a sexy word to me.
No, no, no. Like potatoes.
Yeah, oh my God. No. So, what are 3 pieces of like craft advice that you wish that you'd known when you first started your writing career?
I probably would have told myself to maybe start outlining because when I first started out, I kind of had no my first start out my career. I probably would have benefited from having a little bit more structure. So maybe that. And to start reading craft books early on. I didn't actually buy Save the Cat until I think it was If the Broom Fits, or maybe like during. So it took me about 6 months to actually buy Save the Cat and look into other craft books, because I think that is so important to in terms of like building your writing craft, is to be able to consume content that teaches you about the
Yeah.
writing craft, you know.
Yeah.
So that's probably another tip that I would tell myself. And this one's not necessarily a craft tip, but something that I always think that I wish I had told myself was to like remember why I started writing, because I published Waterfronts 4 in January of 2020. And for some reason, I think it was like during the pandemic, because I think that's why it did really well and it reached a pretty big audience. But I hadn't really been expecting I had expected to sell like 50 copies, and I thought it'd be like to friends and family. So I wasn't expecting any sort of negativity. So when I got my first like 1-star reviews, or like I wish this could be a 0-star, or did not finish reviews, I remember it like really crushing my spirit, because I hadn't prepared myself for it.
Yeah.
And I was like, well, maybe I should stop writing because these people didn't like it. And I really wish I could go back and tell myself, like, well, why did you start writing? Like, you didn't start writing to please the entire world. You know what I mean? You started writing because you loved writing, because you love this genre and you love telling these kinds of stories. And if people don't like it, that's okay. You know, that's something I always say, because I remember I was so devastated about it. I didn't even want to publish Out of My League, which is my second book. So that's the big probably advice that I would tell anybody, is to remember why you're writing. And when the negative things happen and when the positive things happen, you always have something to go back on. Like, okay, this person loves this book and that's fantastic and I really appreciate it. But I'm writing because I love writing. You know what I mean? That we don't get an overinflated ego, things like that.
But no, that's really good advice. People have such different tastes in books. Like you can't write one book that pleases everybody out there. Like even if it's, your favorite book is going to be hated by other people because everybody has such wildly different tastes. So it's, people have different tastes and opinions, but you can't take that on yourself. So but it's so hard when you're first starting out as a writer, because that validation is so important and it feels so heavy.
Exactly. And when you're not prepared for it, it can hit so much harder.
On that note,
positive ending.
Yeah. So do you want to tell everybody where they can find you online?
Sure. So I am over on Instagram at Sarah May Sutton. I'm on Facebook at Sarah May Sutton, and I'm on YouTube at author Sarah Sutton. And yeah, you can find my books on Amazon. They're in Kindle Unlimited, but you can also buy them as a paperback, in regular ebook, or in audio.
Oh, very cool. Yes, I will put all of your links in the description of this video. Sarah, thank you so much for coming and chatting with me. This has been so fun.
It's been.
Yes.